Title: The Unseen Watcher. Story. Samantha and her friends were seasoned hikers, having explored many trails and forests across the country, but the Blackwood Forest, with its dense canopy and treacherous terrain, was their most recent challenge. Nestled in the heart of a remote national park, Blackwood was notorious for its isolation and unpredictable weather. It was also rumored to be haunted, with tales of strange noises and shadowy figures lurking among the trees. Samantha, a skeptic, dismissed these stories as mere superstition. Her friends, though wary, were eager for the adventure. They set out early in the morning, determined to make the most of their day. The forest was beautiful, with sunlight filtering through the thick foliage and a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. They hiked for hours, enjoying the serenity and the occasional wildlife sighting. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, they decided to set up camp for the night. They chose a clearing near a small stream, which provided a natural water source and a pleasant view. The group gathered around the campfire, cooking their meal and sharing stories. As night fell, the forest grew darker, and the once comforting sounds of nature seemed to turn eerie. The gentle rustling of leaves became unsettling, and the shadows cast by the firelight seemed to shift and move. Samantha, trying to shake off the growing sense of unease, went to fetch more firewood from the edge of the clearing. The woods were thick and dark, with the trees towering above her like silent sentinels. As she gathered the wood, she noticed something strange: footprints in the mud, leading away from the clearing and deeper into the forest. They were large, and the prints seemed to be made by someone walking barefoot. Her heart began to race as she followed the tracks, curious and concerned. The forest was silent, the usual nighttime sounds absent. She reached a small rise and stopped, her breath catching in her throat. There, at the top of the rise, was a small, abandoned cabin. It looked old and decrepit, with broken windows and a sagging roof. The footprints led directly to the cabin, but there were no signs of anyone around. Samantha hesitated but decided to investigate. She approached the cabin cautiously, pushing open the creaky door. Inside, the air was musty, and the floorboards groaned under her weight. The cabin was empty, except for some old furniture and a small, dusty journal lying on a table. She picked up the journal, flipping through its pages. The entries were disjointed and rambling, describing a man's descent into madness and his belief that he was being watched by unseen eyes. The last entry was chilling. "They are coming for me. I can hear them breathing." A shiver ran down Samantha's spine as she heard a faint sound behind her, a whispering, barely audible, like the rustle of leaves. She turned quickly, but there was no one there. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, and she decided to return to the camp. As she turned to leave, she noticed the footprints again, but now they were closer, as if someone or something had been following her. She hurried back to the clearing, where her friends were waiting anxiously. They listened to her story with concern, but decided it was probably just her imagination. They spent the rest of the night huddled around the fire, trying to stay warm and calm. In the early hours of the morning, Samantha woke to a strange noise, a low, guttural growl coming from the woods. She peeked out of her tent, her heart pounding. The forest was still and silent, but she could feel the presence of something watching them. The noise continued intermittently throughout the night, growing louder and more disturbing. At dawn, they packed up quickly and left the forest, eager to return to civilization. Samantha glanced back one last time, feeling a profound sense of dread. They never spoke of the incident again, but Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that they had not been alone in the woods, and that whatever had watched them from the darkness had never truly left. Title: The Phantom Hunter. Story. Mark had always been an avid outdoorsman. Growing up, he spent his weekends hiking, camping, and exploring the wilderness. His favorite spot was a remote area of the Green Ridge National Forest, known for its stunning vistas and peaceful solitude. It was the perfect escape from his hectic city life. However, there was one trail he avoided: the old hunter's trail that wound through the deepest part of the forest. The locals spoke of a tragic accident that had occurred there years ago, where a hunter had become lost and never returned. The tale was unsettling but intriguing. One autumn afternoon, Mark decided to challenge himself and hike the hunter's trail. The forest was beautiful, with leaves turning shades of gold and crimson. He packed his gear and set out, determined to conquer the trail that had always been shrouded in mystery. The trail was narrow and overgrown, with twisted roots and branches making the hike more difficult. Mark pressed on, enjoying the challenge and the solitude. The deeper he went, the more the forest seemed to close in around him. The canopy above blocked out most of the sunlight, casting long, eerie shadows on the ground. As he reached the halfway point of the trail, he noticed something peculiar: a hunter's cabin hidden among the trees. It was old and weather-beaten, much like the one in the previous story, but this one was still intact. Curious, Mark approached the cabin. The door was ajar, and he could see a small pile of hunting gear inside. It looked as though it had been abandoned in a hurry. Mark decided to investigate. He stepped inside the cabin, and the air was thick with dust and decay. On a rickety table, he found an old hunting rifle and a notebook. The notebook was filled with notes and sketches of animals, but the last few pages were different. They described the hunter's growing fear of something lurking in the forest, something he couldn't quite see but felt watching him. The final entry was a frantic scrawl: "I hear the footsteps. I see the shadows. It's coming for me." Mark's unease grew as he read the entries. He left the cabin and continued down the trail, trying to push the unsettling thoughts from his mind. The forest was quiet, save for the occasional rustling of leaves. But as he walked, he began to hear a new sound: footsteps echoing his own. They were faint at first, but grew louder, as if someone or something was following him. Mark quickened his pace, but the footsteps grew faster, matching his stride. He glanced back, but the forest was empty, the shadows moving with the breeze. His heart raced as he pushed forward, the footsteps growing louder and more insistent. Suddenly, the trail turned sharply, and Mark found himself face to face with a figure. It was a man, dressed in old-fashioned hunting clothes, his face gaunt and pale. The man's eyes were hollow, and he stared at Mark with a mixture of fear and anger. In his hands, he held a hunting rifle, but it was pointed at the ground. Mark tried to speak, but the man's eyes seemed to convey a silent warning. He backed away slowly, his mind racing. The man's appearance was unsettling, and the way he stared at Mark made it clear that he was not meant to be here. Mark turned and ran, the footsteps still echoing behind him. The forest seemed to close in, the shadows growing darker and more oppressive. He burst through the trees and stumbled onto a well-trodden path, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The footsteps ceased abruptly, and the oppressive feeling lifted. He didn't stop until he reached his car, his heart still pounding. He looked back at the forest, but the figure was gone. Mark left the Green Ridge National Forest that day, shaken and disturbed. He never returned to the hunter's trail, and the memory of the phantom hunter haunted him.